Hi friends, my name is Katrine, and I will be talking to you for about 10 minutes or so about what we learned in class this week. Just a short little discussion and my own little thoughts and stuff thrown in there. So, this week was a really good week. So, it was our first week. So, we started off kind of on Monday actually introducing ourselves and getting to know some people in the class, which was really, really great. I think it was a great activity not only to kind of get comfortable with speaking in front of everybody, but also getting to know everybody's stories and why they were even taking the class in the first place, why they were even there. And there was such a large variety of people and their different requirements that they needed. I think communications is one of those classes that a lot of different people need for their major. So super interesting to see what everybody's background was. Just kind of good to know. And then the second day, I think the speaking mentor speech was extremely helpful, and I know I'll be giving mine probably on Monday. And I think this is a really great activity because it's important to mention that, not everybody is going to speak the same. We all have our own natural speaking styles. We all have our very own personalities, right? So we can't all expect to speak like Martin Luther King or be super expressive and super energetic if that's just not who we are as people. And that comes along with also being fake and being more natural in your speaking is, the audience does pick up on these things, and if you're not kind of staying true to your own speaking style as you would in everyday your general life, then it really can seem kind of fake and can be kind of distracting and just make you seem a little less trustworthy, and just not put a very good picture altogether. So one of the things we also talked about and watched a video about was how to create a good introduction. So one of the first things to do was to obviously gain the audience's attention, and that can be through asking a question of some sort or, revealing some kind of interesting fact or something like that. You never want to make it too cheesy, but I think especially in speaking, it is important to kind of have that pop right out of the door to kind of get the audience thinking, get them kind of excited, say, hey, what's going on? And then after we do that, we want to really reveal our topic and kind of focus the audience on what we will be talking about in that moment. And then want to kind of create a connection within the audience. So why is this important for them? And that is a extremely important link that I think a lot of people end up missing in speeches because they focus so much on the content that they don't realize that they're not necessarily really making the audience understand why this information is even useful to them, which is pretty much key to all of this. So then after that, you do need to establish some kind of credibility. So why should they even listen to you in the first place? What makes you a good person to speak about this subject? And then you kind of want to review your main points and kind of make sure that you are staying organized and that the audience kind of knows in what direction the speech is headed, which is also extremely important because you never want people to feel like you're just rambling and you're really not going anywhere. I think it can also help you as a speaker to kind of stay focused and have your main points in the back of your head. So some of the things we talked about when in terms of techniques on how to become a better public speaker included vocal variety, movement, and gestures. And so all of these things really factor in your own personal speaking style. So for example, with the vocal variety, most of us have pretty expressive voices, but it can also depend. And I think, they're talking a little bit about, being nervous when you first get up there. And you kind of lose a lot of your vocal variety. You kind of lose your high and your lows, your soft and your, and your slow and your fast. And it's just kind of, it all becomes kind of flat and it all kind of just evens out. And for a lot of the audio audio people in the audience, that really just, makes you completely want to tune out and not even pay attention to, what you're saying as a speaker. So I think it's super, super important to keep those emphases and those pauses on certain words. And really, in this sense, practice really makes the biggest difference in the world, because if you don't feel comfortable yet speaking in public and you do tend to kind of get flattened and, flatten your vocal variety, you really need to know in advance where you're going to pause and what you're going to emphasize and when you're going to kind of get a little bit more excited and animated when you speak. So really the dirty work comes beforehand. And then we also talked a little about movement. So the audience does want some kind of variety, some kind of movement going on, but this also depends on your own personal style, and it also depends on whether it makes sense as to what you're speaking about, and whether or not, you have a small stage or a big stage. In many cases, having a small stage, it makes it kind of distracting if you're walking around too much. It can kind of show some nervousness. It kind of tends to end up looking more like pacing than really being like a good visual aid. So you really do need to be careful about that. Some questions you want to ask are: do you usually move when you speak? Will movement actually make your speech any better? And you always want to, if you are going to incorporate movement, you technically want to start in the middle of the room. Generally, that's kind of what is helpful, and then move while you go through your points in your speech. So start out introducing yourself in the middle and going through your introduction. And then as you go through your points, you can move from one side of the audience to the other side of the audience. And I think that's really important, especially with a large group of people, so that nobody feels left out, so that you can use your eye contact all around and really get everybody engaged all the way to the back of the room. Then look forward, so you're really kind of engaging everybody in the conversation, because in the end, you really want to make the speech not seem like you're talking at the audience, but rather you're having a conversation without ever actually hearing them talk. So you really want to keep it that dynamic between the audience. And then lastly, we also talked about some gestures. So in terms of hand gestures, and again, that really plays into your own personal speaking style. So you really should do what comes naturally to you. You shouldn't ever notice if the gestures were good and if they were effective, then you really shouldn't notice them. It shouldn't be distracting. If you try and throw in some gestures, and that's not really your style, then that does tend to look pretty unnatural. So it can, although, help you better emphasize certain points. It can help you kind of better connect with the audience, especially if you're a pretty animated person and, you're telling some kind of stories or something like that. It's really nice to have that kind of visual component to it that kind of helps break down the points and keep the audience engaged and keep them kind of focused on you. And then, so next I want to talk a little bit about some techniques that we learned to, keep our anxiety and our nervousness down. And some of my favorites were to warm up your body beforehand. So I don't know how practical this would be in all cases, because in some cases it just isn't quite as possible to jump out and quickly, do some jumping jacks if you don't want to be too distracting. But I think if you're going into a room knowing that you're giving a speech and that's it, I think it's really, really great to kind of get your blood pumping and kind of become more aware of your physical self. So you know where you are, your gestures, your movements, just generally become a little bit more aware of yourself. And that also comes to play when we're talking about power posing. So power posing kind of helps build that confidence, tell yourself that you are awesome, you are great, because you definitely are. So you just want to have a lot of energy and really go into it feeling really confident. And then next, you also want to possibly meditate. And this, I think, is more preparing your mental self and your brain to kind of stay focused. So you want to kind of focus on your breath, and even if you have thoughts that come and go, you want to keep focusing on your breath and always come back to your breath. And with those two, the physical and the mental combined, I think it'll really help focus your speech and make you a lot more confident in what you're saying, what you're doing, and kind of just generally, keep you all together and keep you very self aware. And that kind of going back to my original point, I think it is really important to stay self aware and make sure that you know your own speaking style and how you can be kind of the best version of yourself. And, whether your strength is the vocal variety or whether it is the movement, to kind of highlight those and then obviously help and bring up your weaknesses. So I hope that this was helpful in summarizing what we kind of learned about during week 1. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, evening, or wherever you are in this wonderful world. And thank you so much again for your time.